Every year in our Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues, there's a new batch of rookies that come in. And obviously, with that, there is a batch of players that we fall in love with. And we always want to add to our Dynasty Fantasy Football teams. Now, for me in 2025, those players that I fell in love with and the ones that I wanted on my fantasy football teams were Travion Henderson, Emeka Igbuka, and obviously Ashton Genty. But the reality is, most of the time, the players we love, the players that we want to draft, are not always the players that end up on our rosters. So today, what I wanted to talk about was the players that did end up on my Dynasty Fantasy Football teams, whether that be because I was drafting in a certain draft position because teams were contending instead of rebuilding, or maybe it's just because I had players higher in my rankings on draft day, higher than where my league mates had them, and those players were just guys that I was more comfortable in drafting. So today we'll talk about the players that landed on my roster, maybe give you guys some reasons as to why I added those players, what I liked in their profile, either analytically or just physically off of talents and traits that they had, maybe landing spots involved as well. And then also tell you guys kind of how I view these players over the short term and long term of the next couple of seasons and what I expect out of these players on my roster. So let's not waste time. Let's hop right into it. And I am going to kick it off with my first player, and that is going to be Tre Harris, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, Tre Harris was a player that I ended up having as my wide receiver 7 in my rankings after the NFL draft. Now, he landed with the Los Angeles Chargers, obviously, in the second round. I do like that draft capital for Tre Harris, but I do also really like the analytic profile for him as well. Obviously has the size, 6'3", 210 pounds, a little bit of a later breakout age than I would like to see for him as a prospect. But when you look at the receiving share, the receiving yardage percentage, the next gen stats score, the prospect grade, all of these things, RAS scores included on his profile, a lot of those are checking green boxes for me. So there is a lot to like there. The dominator rating, the receiving touchdown share are things that were more of yellow boxes for me, but that's not bad. So when I'm looking at him here for the Los Angeles Chargers, this is a player that I think can be the number 2 to Lad McConkey long term, kind of be a big play guy that's a beneficiary of the big arm of Justin Herbert and can be a touchdown guy in fantasy football formats with the ability to grow as a wide receiver at the next level. So this is a player that I just liked the offense. I thought he checked a lot of the boxes, the draft capital, the landing spot, all of those things added up. And I ended up drafting him in quite a few spots. Was one of my favorite second round picks, and he ended up on a lot of my rosters because of that. Now, whether or not he's going to be an instant contributor, I'm not really sure. I do think he is going to be sooner rather than later. I think Quentin Johnston, he's still kind of developing as a receiver, and he has shown improvement. I don't want to diminish Quentin Johnston as a receiver, but I do think that this regime, specifically Harbaugh, Roman, they drafted Tre Harris, and I think Tre Harris is going to be the long-term answer for them. So it's not necessarily a guy that I think is going to come in and blow it up week one and just be an instant contributor, but I do think he is going to be involved in this offense sooner rather than later. Now, the second player that I did add on a lot of my rosters was Jaden Higgins, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. Just like Tre Harris, this is a player who checks a lot of those analytical boxes that I'm looking at as well. Very good draft capital. He was damn near a first-round pick, coming in at round 2, pick 34. And if you like the size of Tre Harris, I definitely like the size of Jaden Higgins. 6'4", 214 pounds. A late breakout age, like I said with Tre Harris, similar here with Jaden Higgins, but that was kind of a common theme in this year's wide receiver class. The other boxes, all green straight across the board. Dominated the receiving share, the receiving yardage percentages, the touchdown shares, the dominator ratings, next gen stats, prospect grades. All of these things were green boxes for me in my analytics sheet. And I feel like that is just something that I like to bank on a little bit. I obviously love watching the film. I like seeing the traits. And I think Jaden Higgins has a lot of things on film that you like: strong hands, ability to get open. But I love to pair that analytic profile with the film and the stuff that I'm seeing there on tape. So I thought he was a really good player. He lands in a situation with the Houston Texans where obviously we lost Stephon Diggs. He is no longer with the team. Tank Dell, unfortunately, just has to get healthy. Not going to be involved in this offense either. And there's a wide open opportunity behind Nico Collins. So I think Jaden Higgins, of all of the wide receivers that I drafted in my leagues, I feel like he's one of the guys that has the clearest path to day one touches. And that's mainly because I didn't get my hands on a guy that I really loved as well in Teteroa McMillan. But I do think Jaden Higgins has the opportunity to be a very quick contributor for fantasy football teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if by midseason I'm able to plug him into my lineup pretty reliably. I do think he's going to be the number 2 long term against Nico Collins. And I think he's going to have a very good opportunity here because the Houston Texans are going to be throwing the football a lot. The offensive line is not necessarily a strong point for them, which means they may have to get that ball out a little bit quicker in those passing games, the short yardage type of stuff, where Jaden Higgins could eat a little bit of that up. Also, with the recent news for Joe Mixon, obviously we don't know what that run game is going to look like. So very excited to see what happens here with Jaden Higgins. And I do think he's a player that can develop into a wide receiver 2 for fantasy football purposes long term. Going on to my next guy, it's another wide receiver. It's going to be Luther Burden III for the Chicago Bears. This is a player that I was very high on pre-draft. Then he got a landing spot that I didn't love, but I grew to tolerate a little bit after the NFL draft. Luther Burden landing here with the Bears, it's very crowded. You have a guy in DJ Moore, you have a guy in Romo Dunze who I really like. Obviously, they added Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet is still there, and now you have Luther Burden in this offense as well. I think this is a player that has a super high ceiling, has the ability to be a game breaker for fantasy if things go the right way. However, we have some off of the field things that have come out, maybe character, work ethic concerns. I don't know how true those are. I guess it really will just pan out over the next couple of years of his NFL career. But I do think this is a player where if I'm going to trust talent and coaching, I'm going to trust Ben Johnson to get the best out of Luther Burden. The profile for him is excellent. It is very, very good. And it's anybody who's seen Luther Burden play knows that he's a super talented player, has all of the height measurables. The breakout age was perfect for him. 18 years old is when he broke out. So you love to see that early breakout. Dominated all of the receiving share, touchdown shares, all of that stuff when he was spending his time there at Missouri. So there's nothing to dislike there. The draft capital was very good as well. Early second round. I like to see that. I think for me, it's really just how crowded is it going to be early on for Luther Burden, and how quickly can he earn a role on this field, and will the talent win out? I'm going to be betting on that. I think a lot of people didn't like the crowded offense during our Dynasty rookie draft, so I was able to get my hands on him in second rounds, which I'm all willing to take that pick in the second round. Those are really just dart throw picks, and it's not very often that you're able to get a player like Luther Burden's talent level in the second round. So I definitely took a lot of him. I'm hoping that pans out for me long term here, but like I said, love the player, think he's super talented. I think the offense is going to take a step forward. We just got to see what happens with this long term. Maybe he ends up being the slot guy for Ben Johnson, who we've seen Amon-Ra in that slot role before, and that was very, very fruitful for fantasy football. So I think at the end of the day, it depends on how long DJ Moore is a Chicago Bear, because if he ever leaves town, that would mean very good things for Luther Burden. But for right now, I'm not expecting him to be a contributor in 2025, but I think he is a high upside swing that has the potential to become a contributor long-term for me in my dynasty leagues. And now the last of the main guys that I have my hands on, I do want to talk about Jaxson Dart. Jaxson Dart landed on a lot of my rosters, and really this is just because I play in all super flex leagues. I do not play in one QBs, and where Dart was going in my rookie drafts was either a very late first or an early second round pick, and I'm willing to take the shot on a quarterback that gets first round draft capital, even though it's not the sweet spot of a top 15 pick, which is what I like to see for the quarterback position. He's still a player that was traded up for by the New York Giants. He lands here as a player who pre-NFL draft was my quarterback too. And then he gets in this situation here with Brian Daboll and Malik Neighbors, where I love to see an established elite wide receiver talent for that rookie quarterback. Jaxson Dart, I think, has a really good arm. He has some very solid accuracy on his throws. I still think he kind of needs to fine tune that a little bit at the next level. And obviously, all of these players do. That's what happens when you get to the NFL level. But I also think this is a player who has some sneaky rushing upside. He uses his legs well. And I think he's going to be a serviceable rusher of the football at the NFL level. Maybe not getting designed runs like guys like Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. But I do think a guy like Baker Mayfield or a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who uses their legs when they need to get out of the pocket, get upfield, kind of get a first down for their team. I think Jaxson Dart is more than capable of doing that, and that's going to add up over the course of the season. So Jaxson Dart is a player that I'm taking the swing on in the Superflex leagues. I think he is a talented player, maybe not super talented, not a guaranteed hit by any means, but I will always take a swing on the quarterback position in my Superflex leagues, especially with first-round draft capital and a player that has rushing upside. So Jaxson Dart, that's the player that I was able to grab a lot of. I'm hoping that it pans out. Don't think he's going to be a big contributor for us in 2025. I don't know how many games he's going to start. I would probably put the over under here at like 3.5 games, similar to what Michael Penix did for the Atlanta Falcons last year. But once he gets the starting job next year, I do think he's instantly going to be worth a first, and you can easily flip him for a first plus in your Dynasty Fantasy Football leagues. So this is more of a market play for me as well as a bet on the talent of Jaxson Dart. Now, two players that I do have quite a few shares of. I didn't draft these players. These players were picked up as UDFAs after my rookie drafts, but I just want to mention them because they're on enough of my teams that I want to explain the thought process. Phil Mafah and LeQuint Allen, those running backs are the two guys that really kind of showed up on a lot of my rosters. LeQuint Allen was just a player that I really liked his analytic profile. I thought he checked a lot of the rushing boxes. He had a large rushing share there at Syracuse, had some good receiving stats, dominated that total touch share for them as well. And I think he's a player that, he's going into a crowded backfield. Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, even Bashal Tutin. But I do like him as a player, and I'm willing to just pick him up as a UDFA and hold him on the bench and see what happens in preseason and training camp. And maybe they do move on from Etienne. Maybe Tank Bigsby gets hurt. Maybe something happens and LeQuint Allen finds some touches. I'm willing to take the shot there just because I liked that analytic profile, and I thought he looked pretty good on tape. The other player is Phil Mafah. Phil Mafah, going to the Dallas Cowboys, didn't think there was a lot that I loved off of Phil Mafah's tape. I think he's a decent, probably a good, not great running back at the collegiate level. Whether that translates to the NFL, I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, he's going to a backfield that has Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, and Jaden Blue. And I think that in itself, just the ambiguity of that backfield is worth taking a shot on. Phil Mafah was a cheap, free lottery ticket to the Dallas Cowboys offense. And, very, very off chance that he hits in this offense or at least has a role in this offense, I'm willing to take the shot. If not, I'll cut him, move on from him. But I just felt like getting into that Dallas Cowboys running back room with how ambiguous it is was probably worth a shot here with Phil Mafah because he was free in a lot of my leagues. So there you have it, guys. Like I said, these were the players that ended up on my rosters. Not necessarily my favorite players in the class. Those were Tet McMillan, Genty, Egbuka, Trevion. But these are the players that landed on the rosters. And I wanted to share that with you guys and kind of tell you guys why and how I think these players are going to pan out for me over the course of the next year or 2 years or so in my Dynasty Fantasy Football League. So as always, if you enjoy the content, let me know in the comments down below what you guys want to see next. Also, let me know who are the most rostered players on your Dynasty Fantasy Football teams from the 2025 rookie class. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next episode. Till then, peace out.